Hello, and welcome to the Million Dollar Electrician Podcast, where we help home service pros like you supercharge your business and spark up those sales.
I'm Joseph Lucani, and together with my co-host, Clay Newmeyer, we're here to share the secrets that have helped electricians sell over $1 million from a single service van.
Now, it's time for sales. It's time for scale. It's time to become $1 million electrician. Hello, and welcome back to the show. We got another great episode today and another great guest. And it's not too often that we have guys that aren't electricians on here. I think Joe Jordan, who's with us, co-founder of SIRO, AI Ridealong technology. We've got an exciting interview to do today, but you're only the fourth or fifth person, Joe, we've had on here who isn't actually an electrician, but it's for good reason, because the technology, the endeavor that Joe's on, aims to help a lot of electricians. And I know there's a lot of chat out in the marketplace right now about AI ride-along technology. Many people say that big R word, sorry, Joe, Rilla. Rilla's been talked about many times, even on a couple interviews here on our show. But SIRO is another major contender in the marketplace. I believe you guys just joined forces with ServiceTitan. Is it okay if we talk a bit about that, Joe?
Sure, absolutely.
Yeah, so ServiceTitan partnered with you guys to make their, what do they call it, Sales Pro?
Exactly.
Awesome. And so basically, this is all bolt on to your company. If you're already on the ServiceTitan CRM, then you're probably already hearing about this. I believe that's released already, isn't it?
Yep, it's been out. We've had dozens of companies try it, switch over from other tools since we launched just, was it October 1st? So the reception from the market's been outstanding.
Awesome, man. Awesome. So we're already seeing some success with this. We know, again, there's a ton of people talking about it. And today we wanted to bring you guys an interview to get the inside scoop. Like, what is this AI ride-along technology? If it's the first time you've ever heard about it, or if it's the 10th or 12th or 100th time you've heard of it, we're going to expose some additional details for you today, and even talk about some excitement with our partnership. And I'll save that more for the end to unveil it with everyone. So, Joe, welcome to the show. Thanks for joining, man. How are you doing today? And Happy New Year, by the way.
Yeah, Happy New Year to you guys as well. Absolute pleasure to be here. I'm doing great.
Fantastic.
Awesome. So glad to hear that, bro.
So in the back, we were just talking about something, and I had no idea what it was, but you and Joseph both worked at a company called Cutco. Is that right?
Yeah, it was this crazy thing where we were in different aspects of it, but we're technically in the same state. We're probably only a couple of counties apart from each other. So it's possible we even met at conferences, because I would go to like the state conferences and things like that. So it's very likely you and I crossed paths at some point in our past.
And Joe, you were with them as sales, and then you rose up to management with them. Is that right, with Cutco?
Yep, exactly. Got there. I mean, so basically Cutco, it's like knives that you sell to moms, is the simplest way to say it. Kitchen cutlery. And I got started there as a sales rep while I was in college. Didn't expect to like it or be good at it, but both ended up happening. Loved it. Made a ton of money, 3, 4, 5 times what I would have as a camp counselor.
Wow.
But the biggest thing I took away wasn't the income. It was like I learned how to sell and how to bet on myself. So may not be an electrician per se, but I have been in the home myself, and that's one of the reasons why I'm so passionate about this technology. Is when I became a manager, like I wasn't able to replicate the kind of results that I got for myself at scale, even though the numbers said we did really well as an office. We were one of the top performing offices in the nation, but we had a lot of people quit. They weren't getting the coaching, the support they needed. They're making simple little mistakes in the home that are preventing them from having the success that they could have given the right mentorship. If we could just catch and correct those mistakes, but it takes too much time. Ride-alongs are really expensive. They cost hours to do one. And to Joseph's point that we were talking about backstage, like you're not even getting the real picture when you're on the ride-along, because the technicians know. They're not doing it exactly the way that they would if you weren't there, and you're hearing a different version of the sales conversation or the service conversation that you went out there to correct in the first place. So that's where something like SIRO comes in.
That's
massive.
massive.
I just wanted to touch on that for a moment, if that's okay.
Yeah, go ahead, Joseph.
I'm so sorry to interrupt. I thought that was so cool that you were talking about that, because from the perspective of someone who's had to do ride-alongs and have had ride-alongs done for me, it can be an incredibly awkward experience for the technician. Because let's say you haven't been formally trained, or you've had light training maybe once a week. You've been going out and doing your own way, and maybe you feel comfortable in doing that way. But now your boss is with you, or your manager is with you, and you have to prove yourself. But now you're almost forced to do the real way you're supposed to do it, and not the way that you've been doing it. So everything comes off like it's your first time you haven't been practicing. And now the manager is not able to correct the actual problem you have because you're not doing the same process. The reason I thought SIRO was so cool is because it will allow the customer, when you mean like the technician who's physically there, to be able to go in an environment where they have the confidence to be themselves authentically without some person standing behind them with crossed arms, and then being able to have that authentic experience get corrected rather than the displayed service they were just trying to do for their manager.
I was actually terrified when this technology surfaced.
Really?
And it's crazy how fast it's come. Like crazy. A year ago, I don't think we even imagined it. Joe, you were probably already deep in the weeds of it, making it happen, right? But for us as sales and service trainers, and everyone fears, Skynet essentially, that we learned from Terminator in our youth, right? And the takeover, and whose jobs are going to be, gone because of AI. And then we started to actually begin to use some of the software with our biggest client. And we realized how powerful this partnership actually is. And not only that, it's not just about us and helping other people. In fact, I think that's a big twist that people might not expect from our conversation today, of how focused this is on your own personal journey in sales and service. And something that I wanted to call attention to that you said before is, you said you learned the value of betting on yourself. What did you mean by that, Joe?
Yeah, well, it was my first job where I ate what I killed. In other words, if I didn't perform, I did not get paid. And if I performed really well, I could give myself a promotion, at least in terms of income. And I had no idea how to sell. I had 3 days of training at Cutco, and then I had to figure out the rest. And I learned a lot by doing ride-alongs with other reps in the office, like riding along with the person who was number one. I was number two that first summer, and watching actual recordings of some of the top reps in Cutco history. One of the reps who at the time had the record for the highest average order, and would pick up a couple of things and then see my average order double overnight. And so it was really the first time in a professional setting I jumped off a cliff and had to build my wings on the way down. And that is what ended up giving me the courage to start my own company later. And I do that probably every 6 months at my job. I find myself in a new stage where I have no idea what the hell I'm doing, and then I figure it out. And then by the time I have it figured out, we're in a new stage and I don't know what I'm doing again, and have to sort of keep figuring it out. But I got that courage from having a sales experience early on.
Great share. Really good share. And I imagine then, as co-founder of SIRO, you must be solving those very problems that you felt at Cutco with this software, where you recognized, hey, if there's top dog on the team, if I could just learn a thing or two from him, how would that impact the bet I've placed on myself? Can you talk a bit about how the design of your software then, for those who've never heard of SIRO yet, or Rilla, or maybe they've got some idea but really don't know the technical aspects of this and how it works, could you tell us a bit about your product and service and how it could help us with sales today?
Yeah, absolutely. So super quickly, you can think of it as an app on your phone or your tablet that records the conversation that takes place in the home, then transcribes and analyzes that conversation with AI to identify the opportunities people have to improve, and then connect those opportunities against the best-in-class examples from the top performers in your company. So you have not just an identified mistake or opportunity, but also the model example you need to go out and do it properly the next time around. And so what is the impact of that on the business? Well, first of all, you're going to save a ton of time on ride-alongs. We don't think you should totally eliminate ride-alongs. They still have a purpose, especially in connecting with the rep and making them feel supported. But like in terms of diagnosing a problem, when you're trying to figure out why someone's not selling as much as they could be, you no longer need to spend 2 hours to do that. You can do it in 5 minutes. Second, like you have recordings of all the customer interactions. So I know a ton of people have lost a bunch of money on refunds, for example, that they have to give. It's like a he said, she said, oh, the tech promised me this. They said this part was going to be free, so on and so forth. Now that you have those recordings, it eliminates a lot of that he said, she said. We've had people save 30 grand in their first couple of months on SIRO just by having those recordings. And then of course, like it's just the time savings, not just the he said, she said. The reason it exists is we want to make your reps better so that your dollars per lead that we spend so much money trying to get actually increases. And we've seen, companies improve anywhere from 20 to 40% in terms of their dollars per lead, their net sales per lead issued. And my favorite part is the end impact that ends up having on the technicians and the salespeople in the home. Some people are making $40,000 more a year individually as a result of being on SIRO, and those are the stats that we're the most proud of, because the reason the company exists is to make the trades and being in the home the most accessible path to financial freedom.
I love that. Now, you had mentioned something that I wanted to touch on, because if it's proper, then and we can figure out how to best articulate it, then it could be a superpower. I know with one party and 2-party consent states, there's a difference between whether you have to announce or not, whether you're doing it. But let's say you're in a 1-party consent state where you don't have to let them know that you're recording. From my understanding, it was that you're not able to use that recording in a court of law or against for profit purposes. You can use it for training. So where is the line that we walk when it's being able to showcase to the customer, hey, you said this and we have it in recording? Would it have to be something you'd have to announce it in advance to be able to use it for them?
Certainly it's going to be. I'm not sure there's like a legal implication, because typically people are not actually like hashing these out in a court of law or anything like that. It's like, hey, actually, you can hear right here the rep said so on and so forth. Here's the transcript. This was going to be included, wasn't included for free, so on and so forth. It's more just a conversation one-on-one with the customer. And certainly it does help if you want to let the customer know ahead of time. They'll be more receptive to something like that. So typically our customers who have those sorts of problems often, which I know is a lot of us, they're letting the customer know that they're recording when they get there. People are scared of it. That's been a non-issue for people that choose to do that in 1-party consent states, and people that are required to do that in the 11 2-party consent states. Where you do have to let them know. It's like so simple. It's like, hey, we're recording the conversation for quality and training, and then you move on. It's not weird unless you make it weird. People are pretty used to it at this point.
Fair enough. Yeah. I come from the New York mentality, so I didn't know if it was one of those things. But hey, I'm glad to know that you've had the experience of it not being an issue.
For sure. And just do you have those 11 states memorized to save people looking them up? Do you know offhand?
Near memorized, but I can pull it up in a second. So yeah, those 2-party consent states. So again, these are the states where you do have to let the customer know that you're recording.
Yep.
It's not like you have to say, hey, is it okay if we record? And then they say yes. Like you let them know, and they're continuing the conversation as their implied consent to be recorded. So that's going to be Illinois, Florida, California, Pennsylvania, Delaware, Maryland, Massachusetts, Montana, New Hampshire, Oregon, Washington. And that's the list that I have. If you talk to us and you decide you want to get started with some other tool in this space, like double check the list just before you get started. That's the list that we have. And what we found is like one of our customers, Blanton and Sons, they do like plumbing and HVAC. Yeah. They've been recording hundreds of appointments all year, and they've only ever had one customer that said they weren't comfortable being recorded. And what they also did was they put in like their appointment confirmation emails that they send out, just letting them know they're going to be recorded in the email as well, just to make sure they're covered. Yeah.
Does that count as a consent at that point? Like if you've sent an email and then as a result, you don't have to announce it at the door because you sent it in a notification or a text prior? Like, is that a way around it?
I mean, basically what the law says is that like if you're going to have in those 2-party consent states, you just have to get their permission before you record. So you can do that really any way. But the best practice is to do it in the call center, to do it in the confirmation email, to do it in person.
Yeah, I like what you said. If you don't make it weird, it's not weird. And for us, I mean, everything we train is about premium service. We actually try to drop the sales word as often as possible and just focus on the service, and in doing service in such a way that creates more sales opportunities. And it's totally congruent with us and our listeners to say, look, we're recording this for quality assurance. Just like when you're on a phone call center with, who your internet provider or whatever, they all record. Everyone's recording at this point. Why wouldn't you expect your home service provider to record as well for that quality assurance?
I'm right there with you.
Something you said, Joe, that stood out. You were listing numerous benefits to doing this. And one I hadn't considered was for the tech, for the individual to be raising their income based on the commissions, performance pay incentives that they have in their position. And I realized also that when you said that, something clicked for me that said, hey, at a time when the market's shifting, I will say, in recruiting and retention, the market has flipped. It used to be that when you needed employees, you'd put a sign in the window and you'd have a lineup of people to drop off a resume or come apply. It's not that anymore, is it? How do you see SIRO actually beginning to help then in that fight with recruiting and retention as well, so that you're seen as the market leader and you're able to better manage and coach those employees?
Yeah, absolutely. So a couple of things. What we've seen is we haven't done a case study on retention improvements in the trades yet. We've done it in some other industries, like door-to-door fiber, for example. We have seen retention of new employees increase. And it's arguably even more important in the trades because it costs way more money to hire or to lose a technician than it does a door-to-door sales rep, who you can basically hire off the street and have them out on the doors in just a couple of days. Definitely not like that in the trades, right?
Yeah.
So first of all, right there, I mean, if you want to keep more of the employees that you hire, then this will certainly help. Because you get them making more money faster. The second knock-on effect is that and this is really a SIRO specific piece of functionality that's really unique to SIRO among the tools that are out there, is we really focus on getting technician buy-in and delivering value to the end technician. We built it for the technicians, for the reps themselves in the home, and then added manager functionality on top. What we found is one of the things that helps people stick around and do better is when they adopt the best practices of their peers and they see there are people next to them in the trenches doing really well. Yep. And when you're in the trenches and you see someone making a lot of money, someone who's in the team meetings with you once a week, but you have no idea what they're doing to get those results, it can feel like those results are impossible for you to get. They just must have the best leads. It must be something about the way the leads are assigned. The customers just must never say no to them.
Bingo.
But with SIRO, there's a feed inside the app where those best performers post their top moments to get to the top of the trending leaderboard. So we get them competing to create training content for everyone else. That's then automatically surfaced to the rest of the organization. And so all of a sudden, those results that seem so impossible for me are just a matter of copying this word track or this one-liner or this question or whatever it was that I just heard in between my appointments or at the end of the day, scrolling through my phone. And so we found that it's not just that it helps people tactically, it also inspires people and raises their own beliefs about where they can go with with their job. That's what actually made me stick with Cutco, was when I heard that guy who had the top average order in the company doing one of his appointments, I realized I could be so much better than I was. And it got me re-engaged and more focused on improvement, doubled my average order, made way more money, and then eventually ended up in management, right? So we try and replicate that on a day-to-day basis with technicians in the field.
The thing that I thought was really cool was how you mentioned Cutco again, because that first immediately came back to my mind where I'm saying one of the reasons why I left was because of the utter lack of training. So it was the fact that you must have been in a different branch than I was. So the fact that we were being told as salespeople, hey, you can make X dollars and these sales are totally possible, but we have no training and no framework to go off of. And it's like, hey, plucky kid, go out there and sell to some people. It doesn't feel realistic. And same thing, once again, as a tradesperson. I remember when I was an electrician just starting off and I was in a room full of HVAC people and they're like, oh, 25,000, 30,000, this is normal sales. And I'm sitting here with 5,000 selling a panel. I'm like, I feel completely left out. But if I was able to see a model that I could follow that could get me to that amount, then it's easier to replicate because at least I know follow this bouncing ball and sales will come. So I think it's an absolute game changer.
Exactly. If you want to get the results of the top performers, you just have to say what the top performers say. Like it's really that simple. Just do what they do to get the results that they get. And there are people on SIRO, right, who are selling the top tech in the nation. I think it's primarily HVAC and plumbing that this tech sells. He's doing Phil Fulaski over at Lee's Air, doing 20 million a year. And it's like, wow, how the hell does someone do those kinds of numbers? Well, like if you're on ServiceTitan, at least, like you have actual recordings from Phil in your instance, you can go listen to exactly how he does that. And if not on ServiceTitan, you can at least hear exactly how the best person in your company gets the results they get.
Absolutely. Yeah. And that's one of the benefits we see and why we're so interested in joining forces with you guys. A little carrot will dangle there as well. And we'll talk about it again later. But ultimately, our vision was to be able to say, well, look, here's the top performers, not just in the individual companies, but in all of our umbrella of electrical service providers who are under the Service Loop umbrella, and be able to see what their top techs are doing. So you're not just limited by your in-house silo now, you're also able to see the expanded version of who the best people with this certain sales process and how they're using it, how they're leveraging the tools that we provide and train to make the most of that situation. And all of that ties in perfectly with something that in the 90s was a huge, huge movement in neurolinguistic programming, NLP, 80s and 90s with Tony Robbins and guys like this, right? Where Tony Robbins was and tells a story of this in one of his books, hired by the US military to try to make improvements to their sniper training. And he took a program in 36 hours. And by the way, one of the things they offered right away, they said, oh, we'll set you up with our top coach so you can learn everything they teach. And he said, no, set me up with your top sniper. I need to learn everything they do.
Yeah.
And so there's a presupposition in NLP that they say, essentially, if someone can do it, someone else can too. And if you have that recipe, I can look at Chef Ramsay on the TV, swear at some people in a kitchen and come out with an incredible dish. And if I have the exact recipe of what he did and the times that he did it, with the measurements of what he did, the pause between doing those things, and all the emphasis that he used, then can I make that same dish given a few tries?
Yeah,
far likelier.
Yep. So and I'll give you, I think it would help to get to a really specific example, right?
Cool.
If you talk to Phil and you ask him, like, what does he do different to get those kinds of results? He'll say that he just shuts up and lets the customer tell him that they want to buy and get the problem fixed, right? And and that sounds really simple. It's like, great, okay, but how do you do that? Well, one of the things you want to do is like let the customer tell you exactly why it's so important to get their electrical fixed or their HVAC fixed. And like one of the things that people do to get the emotional commitment from the customer is just very simply ask them, like, how does that affect you personally? And a lot of reps, a lot of techs never get to the emotional reason that someone should buy. And as a result, they never know how to showcase the value of what they're selling and end up like selling on price, having to give away massive discounts, never getting an upsell on a high ticket thing, right? So on and so on and so on. Now, SIRO can do two things. First off, it's not just going to measure your adherence to the process, right? Everyone wants to be kind of like McDonald's, where they have a process that guarantees the best in class, customer experience. We can definitely do that. But what about things like properly asking the customer for the emotional commitment? Well, we can also measure that. Did the customer express a real emotional reason why they want this problem fixed? And we can measure that at scale. So you can just look at a dashboard and see who's the best at your team at doing this. And then you can go click in and hear exactly how they ask, well, how does that affect you personally? And exactly when they ask, well, how does that affect you personally? Or whatever it is that they're doing to get the customer's emotional commitment. And not only can you share that example in a team meeting, but reps are automatically going to be reviewing, techs are automatically going to be reviewing these examples because we'll be sharing them, in that feed that people are jumping into.
And you can see, and immediately what comes to mind is we've all been in front of the customer who gives you a very shallow emotional commitment. And in very real time, what SIRO would be able to show you is how those top all-stars on your team might go a bit deeper again before they move on in the process. They might stop there and go, well, hang on a sec. I get that the light went out. And Joseph, I saw you fist pump in the back. And for anyone that's just listening today, please share with us why that's so important to you too.
So the reason why I'm so happy is what he's saying is literally a key step in our opportunity call process. We believe that if you can have the customer shift out of logic mind and shift into instead an emotional reason as to why it matters to them for what they do, we literally ask, like, who found the problem? And we're learning the person's name. We're learning, what did they say? Like, what did they say happened? And then what was that like? And we're asking the questions so that the customer can really self-explore why it's important to them. And that's why when you said that you need to create that emotional connection, I'm like, this is so on point and so parallels exactly what we're trying to do. So you're right. Once they're emotional about it, the real reason comes out. They may tell you, I don't have time, but the emotional reason is, I don't want to risk this.
Can I challenge you guys for a minute?
Yeah, let's do it.
Not to go, I don't want to go too far down the rabbit hole, but for someone who just found us, just listening for the first time, I mean, why do you consider that ethical, or do you consider it ethical to play on someone's emotions?
Yeah, I'd be happy to. And let me explain the reasons being. So all life, the way in my perspective, all aspects of life is some form of sales in a rudimentary form in and of itself. There is the transfer of emotion from one person to another to accomplish a goal. Now, the reason that we're at the customer's home is the reason why it's ethical. Our goal as a premium service white glove provider is to never cut corners on quality, reliability, and customer service. We are the finest trained technicians in our industry. We have the best warranties in place, and we are trained consistently on how to provide the absolute best experience. So my logic is, if I truly believe in that service, and I believe that we are the best fit, and we're going to treat the customer the right way, and the job's going to be done the right way, it's actually unethical to not influence them to want to work with you. Because if you don't influence them to work with you, and you know you're clearly better, and you're able to give them a better experience and make them happier and safer, if you don't learn sales, you will have them lose jobs and work with the cheaper providers who have the warranty that doesn't work, or they do it the cheaper way so it fails in the future, or they don't give them premium, mid-range, and economy solutions, or they don't do a follow-up with them, or they do cash and they dip out. So if you look at it in that light, it's more unethical to leave them in their hands than it is to protect them in ours.
Well said. If you believe, here's what my big takeaway there was, if you believe you're the best, which you should, by the way, because that's what's in your control, if you're there doing the work, then you have to believe that, hey, this person reached out to me. It is my duty to be able to present in the lowest possible threat everything that is an opportunity here today for them and us to work together.
Exactly. 100%, man. And if the chances are, sorry, go ahead, Joe.
Well, I was just, you go first, Joseph, and then I'll just layer in a little bit on top.
Awesome. No worries. Realistically, the ultimate view that I'm seeing here is that it's an obligation that we have, because if they don't choose you, then you know that you can't control that further action. I can control everything in my court. I can make sure I give them the best warranty. I can make sure that if something goes wrong, I won't upcharge them and keep charging them more hours. I'll stay late and I'll push to get this done when it's an emergency call. I can't guarantee someone else will. So the line that I always like to reference to is, I'll match their price when they match our service. And I haven't found someone to compete yet.
Love it. Jump in, Joe. Layer on, man. Layer on.
Sure. I was just going to say, and I 100% agree with everything Joseph is saying. The only thing that I'll add on is I think a lot of people hear that, like, oh, you have to get to the emotional reason why they should buy. And they think about it the way that you just framed it, right? Which is playing on the person's emotions. But I think it's useful to think like it's like very hard to get someone to buy something that they don't actually like need or want. Like the only reason that you're there to get the emotional the only reason it's important to get the emotional attachment is so you can figure out if there's even a reason that they should buy and should go, for the more permanent solution or the more the full package, as opposed to like something light just to fix the Band-Aid. And ultimately, if you do that, it's a better buying experience for the person because they're making their own decision as opposed to like what a lot of other people resort to, which is high pressure, high urgency types of sales. But if you get the emotional reason out and you ask the right questions and you're consultative, the person will make their own decision right there in front of you. And it feels better to buy that way and to be serviced that way.
I agree with you there.
Yeah, great buyer's perspective. Speaking of perspectives, we have an inside perspective on AI ride-along software such as yours. And this is something that we picked up in our trainings. There was an individual recently, one of the best sales technicians for an outfit that we work with. And he was starting to see more objections in partner and email it over objections. And as a result, he wanted to focus on objection handles in his training and reported that up the ladder. But by using the software, we're actually able to see that he was not adequately eliminating these objections by asking some of the questions that are laid out in the process for him to do in the early stages, such as the FOIA rapport step where we get our now or later commitment. That's a prime example of how this software could affect you guys listening in real time. And when I say real time, I mean like immediately. Joe, how long after a call is done does that call on average end up in the software for the team's utilization, team and individual utilization?
Yeah. So if you have an internet connection, right, the call will basically be uploaded and transcribed within a couple of minutes, and then all the fancy AI kind of heavy lifting stuff on top, like grading you on finding the emotional reason to buy, identifying exactly where each commitment took place, those sorts of things can take another like 30, 45 minutes. So it is pretty quick. And then if you don't have an internet connection, like it'll just upload the moment you reopen the app with an internet connection. So typically people are able to action on recordings same day.
Wow. That's awesome. So that's like fast. You can have a manager who is like, hey, how did that call go? And could theoretically provide a next day training with that information.
Yeah. And not only that, what some people are now using it for is to identify whether a call should be rehashed. Because we missed something. We should have offered this based on the call. There was a low-hanging fruit opportunity. Actually, we didn't offer financing here, but financing 100% would have like led to the deal closing. So we, be able to actually score on a scale 1 to 5. How valuable is this to rehash? And then the manager can call that person the next day and say, hey, actually, like based on the conversation, it sounds like this might actually benefit you, and go and get that thing closed.
That's amazing for the follow-up game. Like if you have a technician who's consistently having bottom option sales, that's a good thing to look at as well and be like, well, how is he describing the problem? How is the solution presenting itself? And is he leaning the customer to a particular choice? I can imagine that would be really helpful because it's like, well, you did change their GFI, but I can see clearly that he is working from home and he's telling you to keep stripping. Why don't we recommend a localization for him? Why don't we recommend a dedicated circuit based on what we're hearing?
Yeah. Yeah. Fully agree. So, Joe, I want to respect your time. I know we're down to our last few minutes here. Are you a hard stop in 2 minutes?
Let me check.
And I think we got a few minutes extra if you do.
I do.
Awesome. Awesome. Okay. So I wanted to ask you a couple specific questions. One is, where is SIRO headed? What's your vision for this thing? How big are you? Where are you going? What is your goal? When do you know you've realized it? I know I just unpacked a bunch there, but if you can short answer us on what you see for the future of SIRO, I'd love to know.
Yeah. Again, the vision is to make selling in the home, in the field, servicing in the home, in the field, the most accessible path to financial freedom. And we're going to do that by putting world-class coaching in every field pro's pocket. And so what's our measurement of success? It's like, well, did we break the 80-20 rule where, 80% of revenue of sales come in from 20% of the reps, the technicians. And we believe that's because there's just not enough coaching. 20% of the people are naturally going to be really good and they'll figure it out on their own. And the other 80% really are only going to be as good as the coaching that they receive because they're making some mistake that they can't figure out on their own. Mm-hmm. And so that's what success looks like to us, is breaking the 80-20 rule. And what that means for the industry is, like, imagine a world where the average results were the same as your top performers. What that does, not just to your immediate revenue, but also to the buyer experience, to the amount of referrals that you're going to get, to the cost of leads that eventually comes down because of that, to the amount of growth, like how aggressive you can be in growing your company. So all of a sudden, each rep is a lot more, each technician is a lot more profitable, right? It has all these knock-on effects. Recruiting becomes easier because the industry starts to become known as a place where people really do make the kinds of money that Joseph was talking about is so often promised, right? And how do we do that from here? Well, we're now finally at a place where we can measure not just whether people are skipping a commitment or not following the process, but the actual nuanced sales skills, like authentically building urgency, like selling consultatively, like doing an emotional reason level of discovery. So the next step for us is starting to automatically coach people on those things by creating little mini courses, that you send to a rep. So you can imagine, if it's the emotional reason thing, right? Sending them a little package of an example where they could have 30-second clip gone a little bit deeper and then immediately play afterwards an example from someone on their team they respect going a little bit further, and then explaining why that was so important, and then prompting them to do a role play from that previous scenario where they do go a little bit deeper. And then the AI role plays and continues the conversation from there. And then we pin that thing to their profile so they can track their improvement on that skill before they move on to the next skill, whatever the biggest improvement opportunity they have is. So that's kind of where we're trying to go.
I love that. Have you got some stats that you would be able to share off the top of your dome from implementation? Maybe some averages that you've been able to see in increases across sales and service technicians?
Yeah, absolutely. So we've seen, in the first 3 to 6 months, anywhere from 20 to 40% improvement in basically revenue per individual. Those numbers sound huge, and that's kind of the most rewarding part of it for us, is that they're making so much extra money. I mean, we have an example of people who are literally benched because they were doing so poorly that it just cost the company money every time they went and sent them out leads. But they got on SIRO, they listened to best class examples from their peers, and when they came back in their first month, they were above average for the company. So
that's gonna be a huge moral boost too, or morale boost.
Yeah, and we've experienced that across your team with everyone we've been in chats with and meetings with so far. Everyone is so excited about this, bringing this forth the industry. So we commend you on that, and clearly you have an inspired staff, an inspired team, rather driving this thing, and it's exciting for us too. As we've kind of dangled, we're joining forces with you. You guys, we're so thankful rather for you guys having us and helping us create a bit of an umbrella where even the smaller level guys who aren't yet quite past that 7 figures or multiple 7 figures, maybe you're not ready for ServiceTitan just yet, you could still have this kind of software in-house. And I'm going to let you speak to this as well, Joe. Who is your ideal person to work direct with SIRO, or I guess even if you wanted to speak to work with you through ServiceTitan? Who's that ideal level of customer for you?
Yeah, totally. So really, we're really just looking for two things. Number one, it's someone who like is going to be willing to invest the time it takes to get something like this started. It's not something where you just flip a switch, right? There's behavior change with the technicians. There's behavior change with the managers who now need to start using this tool to get the results out of it. If you just buy it and expect it to magically produce results, you're not going to have a positive experience, right? You need to invest time getting it up and running and getting people using it before you start seeing those results. So that's the first thing. It's someone who's like willing to spend the time on the onboardings, hold people accountable to using it in those first couple of weeks while we're getting everyone acclimated and building the habit. And we'll, of course, support you with that. We have talk tracks on how to introduce this to your team, on how to introduce this to management, how to hold people accountable. We have the dashboards you need to figure out if people are doing things the right way, so on and so forth. And the second thing is it works best when you have at least 10 people out in the field, whether you're talking about salespeople, technicians. So we are looking for people who have at least that 10 to get started right now. Eventually, we'll start working with more and more of the outfits that are not at 10 yet. But right now, that's where we really find the best results.
That's amazing. Thank you for that. And that ties perfectly into what I'm saying. So even if you're someone who's under 10 and you want to explore what this could look like under the Service Loop umbrella, then you've got an opportunity to learn amongst other people in your industry, following a consistent process that we teach every single day of the week. Mm-hmm. On that note, I wanted to bring in a late but never too late win of the week. This one from Bailey, who just sent in a win this morning, said, a year ago when starting the business, we set up projections for 1, 3, and 5 years. And Bailey says he's proud to say that their first year in business is larger than they projected for year 5. So that's a massive win for Bailey. And we've got some of that in our content today. If you're following us on Facebook, you're in the Facebook group at Million Dollar Electrician. You're also going to see some of that context being that, I hate to say this, guys, Bailey's not in a big city. We've said this many times. We don't serve communities. We serve people. And that's based on thousands of year-old psychology and the emotional commitments that we talked about today. And if you can serve a person at a level they deserve while serving them with the collective of your experience and knowledge in a way that is low risk, low threat, and high rapport, then even in a rural country area like Bailey, you could see massive growth and fast forward your business by 4 years. That's massive. So big congrats to Bailey. Thank you for that share, brother. And just to finish us off here then with the few minutes we have, Joe, I wanted to thank you again. I did. SIRO has been a huge uplifting piece of this industry already. I'm very excited for what's coming. And I want to give you the stage for a moment. Is there anything else that you wanted to share with the electricians out there, home service providers listening to this today?
Sure. Yeah. Last thing I'll say is, and again, thank you for having me on. Last thing I'll say is, if you want to find out more about whether SIRO is right for you and give SIRO a try, you can head to SIRO.ai, SIRO.ai, and click book a demo. And you meet with one of our reps, and we'll walk you through exactly how it works and whether it could be a good fit for you.
Yeah, I love that. Again, couldn't say enough good stuff about your team. I guarantee you'll be happy on one of those calls. And if you want to hear about whether you've met with his team, Joe's team, SIRO's team or not, and you want to hear more about how you could partner with us to get a taste of SIRO in your company, then comment where you're hearing us first. Just say SIRO. We'll know what to do. Or go to our website, servicebyelectricians.com. Fill out a contact form there. Again, keyword SIRO. I'd be happy to talk to you about what AI ride-alongs could do in your business. Not to mention having a consistent sales process to follow, not to mention having an umbrella shared with all the other electricians who are killing it. Like, I guess I'll insert one last win. I just heard from Dan Totten. There'll be a 2-year anniversary interview coming up very soon for you guys. Dan's been doing big things. We interviewed him exactly 1 year ago. He was at 1.1 million after 1 year of business. He's now pushing 2.75, I want to say, in year 2. Just bought a couple more vans, looking to double up again. Dan's got some great stuff going, but one of his techs that Joe's been working with has also just eclipsed your record, Joe. 1.3 million in sales for the year.
That's what I'm talking about.
Big old average ticket over 4K. Guys, there's a ton of exciting stuff for this year. Million Dollar Electrician podcast going to be bigger than ever. SIRO partnership going to be bigger than ever. We've got a ton of other exciting stuff that I can't just share today, but that should be enough to get you coming back here for next week. Thank you again, Joe. Thank you, SIRO. Thanks, Joseph. Wishing you guys all the best new year and a much brighter future in 2025. We'll talk to you again soon.
May y'all be blessed, guys. Take care.
And that's a wrap for today's episode of the Million Dollar Electrician podcast.
We hope you're buzzing with new ideas that charged up to take your business to the next level.
So don't forget to subscribe, leave a review, and share the show with fellow electricians. Together, we'll keep the current flowing.